He calls and says, after using your product, half my field burned down. That's all.
It burned?
First, you do the work, and then you get the results based on what you did.
Now what's there? Desert and ocean. It might seem like, well, not a big difference. In the morning, you go into these battles, fighting for the farmers.
Actually, there is space for everyone.
Yet their land and crops are failing.
I rent this land here for 10 years. I'll try to squeeze as many resources out of it as I can, and then I leave, and, well, it's not my problem anymore, right?
Kazakhstan is among the top 10 largest wheat exporters in the world. But few people know what's really happening inside this market and where it's headed. Today, we're going to talk about this with Galymzhan Klebdeldinov. He actually started his career in agriculture, selling various products to Kazakhstani farmers. And now, he's focused on promoting the idea of biostimulants made from oceanic seaweed. Today, we're going to figure out what exactly biostimulants are, why the market is changing, and what that means for those involved in agriculture. Galymzhan, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon.
You're listening to the xChief Central Asia podcast. When an average person thinks about agriculture, fields, tractors, grain, they never really think about what else is going on beyond all that. They don't look at the root of the problem, they don't dig into the core of everything, and as a result, they can't objectively assess the situation. What has actually changed in this world over the last 10 years in the way farmers work? What is it that most people just don't know about?
Farmers have started to trust technology. That's something we don't see, regular people. We just don't notice it. But farmers have really started to trust technology more. New products that, so to speak, have a scientific basis, scientific justification for their usefulness. And farmers have started using them and have begun to get good results. So it's not just an investment, but it's an investment that eventually pays off. Farming came to us. Most of the knowledge came from the Soviet Union. So for a long time, these were very traditional cultivation methods. But over the last 10 years, Kazakhstan has become more international, more open to information from Europe, from America, as well as from Asia, from China, from Japan. At this point, a farmer is already, let's say, has become even more competent in their business. Now, he himself understands what's happening, so to speak, in his own soil.
Uh-huh. Interesting. We always hear, when it comes to agriculture, about sustainable development. But, well, we all understand just how unstable this business, this field of agriculture really is, right? And there are years when there's no rain. There are years when there is rain. There are harsh winters and there are mild winters. Everything is completely unstable. But nevertheless, we keep hearing about sustainable development and green agronomy every single day on the internet among people. Probably most of all on the internet and on TV. In your opinion, is this a real market shift, or is it, let's say, just clever marketing packaging? They did a good job, and now that's why we keep hearing about it.
Actually, this really is an important point that we as a society as a whole should be paying attention to. Yes, of course, there is definitely some marketing involved, but there's also the fact that, yes, a farmer might understand this, but it just might not be profitable for him. Or there might be, so to speak, such pressure that he simply can't practice sustainable agriculture. Many agro holdings grow wheat, that is, only wheat, for example. In northern Kazakhstan, we grow only wheat. In the east, the main monoculture is sunflower. But the very fact of using only one crop means that you need to have crop rotation. All of this, so to speak, eventually eats away at the land. That is, we take everything from the soil but don't give anything back. So, sustainability here is exactly about working in a balanced way with the land. So, we're not just exploiting the land, we're also returning useful nutrients, meaning we're taking care of the land itself, not just our own benefit as farmers.
But you said that it's not good to grow only one crop. So ideally, let's say, well, for example, a million crops up there in northern Kazakhstan, or at least more than one. Or is this about something completely different and it's better to grow something else?
Yes, actually, farmers understand this very well. There's a technique called crop rotation. What's the essence of this process? So, a certain crop, like, for example, sunflower or wheat or even corn, each of them takes certain things from the soil and also gives something back to the soil. So, if we only use one crop, we'll end up depleting specific elements in the soil. But if we practice crop rotation, we give those elements a chance to recover while we grow another crop. Also, there are certain crops that are planted specifically to give something back to the soil. And after those crops, for example, it gives you the chance to get much better results because you've restored the soil's energy.
Uh huh. And speaking of the soil's energy, well, some of our listeners, viewers might not all be farmers, right? And for their understanding, could you please explain? Many people say that if you don't take proper care of the land, there will be erosion, something will happen to the soil. And as someone who is, let's say, specifically from the berry field, what can really happen if, let's say, you farm or use, for example, 10 fields incorrectly?
Well, in the end, you just won't get anything and you'll end up with dead land.
Get land, right?
Yes. Here, what do I mean when I talk about the land itself? So, this is exactly the thing that I myself am trying to talk about publicly, to instill this idea in the minds of our modern farmers. That is, the land is a living organism. So, you shouldn't treat the land as something inanimate. There are its own processes happening there, living processes. It's just like it's the same as, for example, what happens in our stomachs.
Right.
There's a whole separate ecosystem there. The same kind of sphere exists in the soil as well. So when we just try to get something from it without paying attention to what's actually happening in the soil itself, it can lead to the same soil erosion. It can simply lead to soil infertility. In the end, it will just be dead land where not even weeds will grow.
All right, fine. Let's say I used the land incorrectly. Yeah, I farmed the wrong way. And now this has happened to me. Dead land. How realistic is it to bring it back to life? Or is it impossible to restore it?
In the end, it's just a matter of time.
Uh-huh.
It's not about adding some kind of chemicals or anything like that. It's a matter of 3 to 5 years. When you work with the land, not trying to get something out of it, but just trying to restore the land itself, its fertility.
Uh-huh.
There are quite a few, well, not a lot, but there are some rare cases where people with knowledge came to land that was considered, well, basically infertile, where nothing could be grown. In the end, they restored it, and after a couple of years, it became one of the most fertile black soil and the most productive land in the area.
So it turns out you can restore everything, but it's a matter of time and resources.
Yes, that is, you need to treat the land like a living organism. Just like you can heal a person, you can heal the land in the same way.
Uh-huh. That's an interesting analogy. We also very often hear that, for example, Kazakhstan, right, in the Central Asian region, is one of the largest wheat producers in the world. Is that you mentioned that in the north they grow crops. How would you assess overall the modernity of the Kazakhstani market? If we take, for example, the European market, how far behind or how close are we? Or maybe we're even ahead in some areas.
Regarding Kazakhstan, if we look at it, yes, maybe we're behind Europe in some aspects, maybe by 5 years, maybe by 10 years. But there are certain specific areas of our agriculture where I would even say we can successfully compete against them. If we look at Central Asia as a whole, I believe that Kazakhstan is actually the leading country in the field of agriculture. I think at this point we've already caught up with such agricultural giants as Russia and even Ukraine. And I think Kazakhstan has the potential to truly become an agricultural hub in Central Asia, in the entire CIS, where we could now not so much compete with the European market, but already work with them, so to speak, as equals.
We often hear that to address and resolve specific challenges in agriculture, individuals frequently turn to the use of pesticides or to various different types of chemical additives. Sometimes these are of natural origin, sometimes they're semi natural, and sometimes they're completely chemical. And as we can see from the example of different countries, sometimes crops fail. And sometimes, even, maybe you've heard about this, actually, I'm sure you have. Sometimes it leads to situations where bread made, for example, from this wheat has caused illnesses in people. So, my question is about biostimulants. After all, it's not exactly a fertilizer, and it's not exactly a chemical. It's not something that everyone should be scared of or anything like that, but at the same time, people talk very little about biostimulants. Maybe there is a lot of talk, but at least for the average person who deals more or less with agricultural issues in one region or another, or in a different country, I think it's not really something that's even on their radar. Again, we all know what fertilizer is, but a biostimulant, even the word itself sounds kind of unusual. Can you explain what it actually is?
Yes, biostimulants, actually, in the global agricultural market, I wouldn't say there's some completely new product, but you mentioned a lot of different products. So, in general, there are all sorts of products used in agriculture, like pesticides, and there are also other types of products. Mainly, these are plant protection products, right? And then there are also fertilizers. So that's the second group. Those are the products that provide nutrition directly to the plant. And you are absolutely right to point out that, especially, pesticides tend to leave residual elements in the plant itself. So, here, what's even more important is the process of how you use these pesticides, because you need to allow a certain period for them to be washed out of the plant before it can be used for consumer purposes. If we take a biostimulant, then a biostimulant is a product that has a wide range of effects on the plant. But first of all, if we go back to the analogy with humans, so you have antibiotics, those are pesticides that you use to protect yourself from diseases. Yeah, fertilizer, which are basically your main food intake, right? Like proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. They're also biostimulants. I would call them in this same category, I would call them vitamins. So it's something that, when used, allows the plant to absorb the same fertilizers more efficiently. And it's a specialized agricultural product that assists the plant in successfully navigating the stage when farmers are applying various pesticides with significantly less stress. Because pesticides are a pretty harsh product, especially the ones we use here in Kazakhstan. We have very little regulation in this area, and they actually have a very harsh effect on the plant itself. So that's exactly where the biostimulator helps in this case. But the biostimulator, unlike other products, has a broader range of effects on plants. And what's most important is to actually understand what a biostimulator really is. Because right now, anything that's more or less organic or, well, there are a lot of things that are called biostimulators. A biostimulator is a product based on organic matter that stimulates plant growth and also improves plant immunity.
You just mentioned that pesticides are definitely the kind of thing that leaves a huge trace behind. And what about biostimulators? You say that we also consume them, but do they leave anything behind besides their beneficial effects?
It's very hard to cause harm with a biostimulator because the biostimulator itself uh, is a pure extract of seaweed. There are no external additives in our product, not even, so to speak, any organic additives like amino acids or plant hormones. So it's pure organic matter, meaning even a person could drink it. It won't taste very good, but let's say there can't really be any direct harm from it.
Speaking about the farmer, so think about it. An ordinary farmer, right? When he faces a situation, or when he has to make a difficult decision whether to go with chemical pesticides, some additives, or biostimulants, does the farmer actually see the results, or does he just take someone's word for it? How does this process work, and what do real field trials look like? No one usually says, here's how we tested a biostimulant made from seaweed. Somehow nobody talks about it, and it's rarely written about. So please tell us. I think our listeners would find it really interesting.
Well, first of all, you can't really substitute anything here. That is, for a plant to grow properly, first of all, it needs protection from weeds, it needs nutrients, and it also needs biostimulants that improve the effectiveness of both of those first products. As for how these technologies are actually implemented and how field trials are conducted, of course, our farmers are very well informed about all the new technologies and new products. And for them, first and foremost, it's important to show results through demonstration trials, to show the effect of the product itself so they can clearly see it for themselves. Usually, of course, it's not just any farmer. In most cases, these are the specific types of agricultural producers who are already, so to speak, influential and respected opinion leaders in their local area. And other farmers usually listen to this person, and based on his experience, they repeat the same nutrition and protection schemes. And yeah, usually, how does this happen directly? So, we specifically make an agreement with the farmer and set up a demonstration trial on his field. For my part, as an official representative of the company and a specialized product representative, I share my deep knowledge with him about how to best use this product effectively and at exactly which stage of the process. Of course, things here can't be strictly regulated because every region, every country, farmers everywhere already have a certain base of knowledge that they're used to. Farmers are generally pretty conservative people and tend to stick with what has worked before. They're very conservative when it comes to changing their minds and starting to adjust their crop protection and nutrition plans. But if you show results through demonstration trials and also show the results in terms of economics, like how much a biostimulant costs, for example, so he invests this much and in the end gets this much return. So they need to understand, in monetary terms, what this product actually means for them. Because biostimulants, the company representatives who are now working with biostimulants, it's, so to speak, a very modern and currently very popular product. And yes, for the most part, you could say it's marketing. There are actually some effective options, but you need to show real results with farmers.
I immediately found myself wondering about something. First of all, do you happen to have any kind of laboratory or mini farm where you test out all of these different things before approaching farmers? Or do you just go straight to them like, hello, Gilmard, we have a new product. We tested it with you last time. I want to test it again. Or does it work a little differently for you? And the second major question arising from all of this discussion is how, in a general sense, is the pricing of biostimulants calculated and determined?
Yes, of course. We have our own laboratories, but any product must be tested by independent organizations and institutes. Our company spends well over €500,000 every single year on various scientific experiments, specifically with research institutes to analyze our product, to check many different aspects of our product, and to see exactly how they affect plants at the genetic level. Yes, that's absolutely right. We have to test all of this ourselves first, so to speak, before we go to the farmer. In other words, before we even get to the farmer, a huge amount of work has already been done. You need to come to the farmer with a finished product that really works. Regarding the issue of pricing, of course, you have to take the whole process into account. That is, we are also one of the only companies in the world that has a complete production chain.
Uh-huh.
We have our own specialized seed banks where we carefully select and meticulously breed specific algae that we will cultivate. We also manage every aspect of the harvesting of the algae ourselves, the extraction of the biostimulant, transportation, and the entire logistics process, all the way to the final end consumer, our farmer. But since we control the entire chain, we're able to offer a more competitive price for our product.
From the perspective of, let's say, international operations, how difficult is it for different regions to work together in a company like this? And in general, is that even necessary? How often do different regions or divisions interact with each other in your company? And looking at it from a different perspective, how does it bring about a positive impact on the company's overall experience when you have operations in Chile, Namibia, and other parts of the world all occurring simultaneously?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Our production is quite international. Any agricultural product aims to be present in every corner of the world, especially where it's relevant in agricultural countries. As for our company, yes, we are quite an international company. Our headquarters is in Amsterdam, and we have people working for us from all over the world. I see this as a big advantage in terms of collaboration, in terms of sharing experience, and moving forward. Because even fundamental aspects like mentality or the specific background a person comes from, all of that contributes to giving our company its own unique flavor. I'm from Kazakhstan myself. I'm currently the person responsible for managing the region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and I include every single country in that territory, Ukraine and Russia. These are all markets where agriculture has traditionally been one of the main priorities. And of course, if we're talking specifically about farmers, so to speak, farmers differ in how they work there because, again, these are different climate zones, these are different crops that are grown, and the overall economic level of each country is different. That's why the approaches can be a bit different. But overall, I've found that from my experience, as I've noticed, farmers are actually remarkably similar to each other all over the world, no matter where they are. These are dedicated individuals who have decided that they will work the land, they will work with the land, and they will cultivate various crops and plants. So if you look at it, let's say, not just in the small details, but from a much broader perspective, it's a process that never gives you immediate results. First, you must put in the work, and then you finally reap the rewards and see the fruits of your labor based on your work. And that's the farmer's mentality. In other words, they act first and then they talk. And this is what unites farmers all over the world. It's not like in Argentina they work differently, or in America where they have their own technologies. Everywhere, farmers basically have the same mentality, and the differences are really just surface level.
So you see that there are entirely distinct and separate markets, vastly diverse geographical regions, and as you move between them, what is the primary, most significant difference between them? Aside from the differences in farmers, of course, different people and mentalities, is there really any fundamental difference, for example, between Eastern Europe and Central Asia?
No, of course. I mean, you can see there are similarities,
Yeah, okay.
but there is also a fundamental difference between these two regions. As I was saying just a moment ago, so the very first thing to consider is that it really depends on which specific crops are being cultivated. But crops, too, aren't chosen, so to speak.
Deliberately.
Not just out of the blue, yeah. It's chosen according to the climate zone. This crop, for example, is suitable for cultivation in a certain region based on its climate zone. And there are differences, yes. But for example, if we take similar countries like Ukraine and Kazakhstan, where both Ukraine is considered a breadbasket, and so is northern Kazakhstan, meaning they're both breadbaskets. But even between them, there will be differences, specifically in terms of climate.
Uh huh.
and in terms of the overall experience of farmers as well.
Yeah, sure.
Farmers always work very closely with the government. Farming is not a cheap business. The government has a huge influence on how a farmer ultimately cultivates the land and how they run their agribusiness in general.
Right now, the situation is very unstable, as I mentioned earlier, especially in the world when it comes to climate. For example, last year, a lot of crops were lost in Western Europe. And when we see instability in the East, where cheaper grain or crops, agricultural products in general, are coming to the West, then Western producers start to lose out. And who do they rely on? Naturally, on the government for their support. Also, on certain programs that can help farmers with solving land related problems. Because if they have any issues with the weather, it ends up damaging both the land and the crops. It needs to somehow be brought back to life and used to grow crops again. And so, actually, using this example, I'd like to clarify. Does your company have any training programs for farmers? Do you interact with them in any way besides just the business model? Again, simply training, for example.
Yes, of course. Actually, overall, our interaction with farmers is never purely business. It's always a long term relationship. This also includes training for farmers. It's not that farmers really need a lot of training. It's more about providing extra support in terms of new knowledge, things like demonstration trials, and sharing experiences between different farmers. For example, we have a program called Farmer Ambassador. So, what do we do here? Usually, our company works with farmers through distributors.
Uh huh.
But there are also programs where we work directly with farmers in every corner of the world. So, what's the essence of the program? We work more closely with the farmer themselves. Of course, they receive our products directly, but we also organize international, let's say, events for all farmers where we invite them to conferences where they can exchange ideas. Yes, of course. There will be a training part and, so to speak, a part where they can relax. But what's even more important is that through this program, farmers have the opportunity to exchange experiences with their colleagues from completely different parts of the world. And what's interesting is that in such cases, sometimes when a farmer from America, for example, meets a farmer from Europe or a farmer from China meets a farmer from Africa, they end up looking at some of their problems from a completely different perspective. That is, they have the opportunity to gain truly invaluable experience from what their colleague has in a completely different part of the world.
Now, that's actually a really interesting question. Again, just to continue the previous topic a little bit, and if, let's say, something suddenly happened to the farmer's crop, or there was some situation, something happened to the harvest, does your company, which works closely with him, provide any support or help in such cases, or maybe in some other way?
Of course, we always support the farmer, but you have to understand that the farmer is an independent entity. That is, we can't control all the processes he carries out on his farm. I can share an interesting case that happened to me when I was still working, when I was young and inexperienced. And one of the very first agricultural companies I ever worked for was BASF.
Well, then,
So we had this situation where a farmer reached out to us, and we were actually supplying him with pesticides at the time. He calls and says, "After using your product, half my field burned." That's it.
it actually burned?
Yeah, the plant just burned. So, I mean, a really strong chemical was used, and the plants just went down. That's it. He says, "It's because of your product." Well, in this case, of course, we had to go out to the site right away. I arrived, listened to everything the farmer had to say, and took samples. That is, both soil and the plants themselves. I came back here and personally submitted them. I submitted them to the lab for analysis. It actually turned out that, well, the active ingredient that is in our products, it wasn't present at all whatsoever on these plants, but they actually ended up finding a different active ingredient. It was actually a product called glyphosate. That is, it's mainly used as a weed killer to get rid of all that. And he used it on his corn, on his sunflower. So, of course, he burned it. In the end, the core of the problem was that his tractor driver, who was supposed to treat the fields, was working the night shift and simply mixed up two canisters. So basically, he just burned all his fields. Well, he definitely burned at least half of them. And situations like this can happen to a farmer, especially with plant protection products like fungicides and insecticides. These are actually pretty harsh chemicals. As for my current product, the one I work with, a biostimulant, we haven't recorded any such cases anywhere in the world.
No, no, let me add something. I mean, let's say, for example, Hurricane Katrina hits.
Uh,
So he says, hello? You ask, how are you? Is everything okay? And he says, damn, there's no farm. There's no farm. So what do you do? I mean, does your company say something like, well, my condolences or something? Or is he just on his own in this situation?
in general, farmers really deeply understand how much they rely heavily upon the unpredictable weather conditions.
Yeah, sure.
Even if Hurricane Katrina hits him, for him, it's not something that just fell out of the sky unexpectedly. That is, he will have some warning signs, he will understand. Farmers always very carefully assess their capabilities and the weather conditions that might happen, for example, in the next season. So I wouldn't say that it would be some kind of shock for him. In other words, they're always prepared for the worst possible outcomes. We always interact with farmers on a very personal level. The farmer's the first to know, and we are the second to find out what's going on with him.
Ivo?
And of course, it's always important to us that the farmer is doing well.
Nere?
And so, of course, we want his business to grow. But there are things that we don't have any control over them. Things like natural conditions, like the weather. One season could be a complete drought. The next season could be way too rainy. What the farmers themselves, in general, are prepared for.
But everyone always thinks that a farmer is a guy in a straw hat with a piece of weed in his mouth, wearing denim suspenders, and, a t shirt or maybe a plaid shirt. So, as people who collaborate closely with farmers, when you go to sit down to meet with them, do you go in a suit like a professional bank employee, or do you also put on a hat and shake their hand? How does that actually play out in the field?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty funny stereotype. Actually, that's how we all look out in the fields. I dress like that myself when I go out to the field. It can get pretty hot out there, and you end up spending a lot of time there. But honestly, that's kind of underestimating the farmer. The farmer is actually a pretty dignified person, someone who knows their own worth, and I'd say they're usually quite well put together. So when you talk business with them in their office, of course, but at the same time, a farmer is the kind of person who will never shy away from getting their shoes dirty, messing up their t-shirt, going out into the field, pulling up a bush, showing you the results, digging around in the soil. In other words, this is a person who interacts directly with the land. But yeah, it would be wrong to say that's the only way he is, like always with a straw in his mouth and a hat on his head. I walk through the fields like that too, but when it comes to,
It's a stereotype. I do it.
yeah, yeah. But when it comes to business matters, of course, I'm not saying you have to wear a suit, but, dress decently, like a shirt and jeans. That's normal. Just come and have a conversation. They're not going to judge you by your appearance, of course. Whether you show up in a suit and tie or not, it doesn't really matter. Here, it's more about, well, like with farmers, the facts speak for themselves.
Speaking of stereotypes, so besides the stereotype about farmers, there are also stereotypes about Africa that it's not the most developed place, right? At least the South, you know? And so you're saying that you have a farm in Namibia? Plus, before this episode, you told me that you recently got back from Namibia. How much of a main stereotype is that, really? And as a company, how does it feel to operate in different markets at the same time? I mean, it's one thing to exchange experience, but it's something else entirely to exist in a multicultural environment at the same time and to physically be there, like actually building farms there. That's a completely different approach. Besides the fact that there are people and mentalities there.
Actually, our company it's a Dutch company.
Yeah.
So, we have farms in Namibia, Chile, and New Zealand. And that really shows our international approach. Yeah, I recently went to Africa for the first time in my life, and I went there without any prejudices. I'm always very open to meeting new people. I'm always open to new experiences, especially when it comes to cultures and cultural exchange. I mean, in the mentality of people, there are these stereotypes about any continent or any country. Personally, I think that you need to stay open to new opportunities because you never know what might be waiting for you there. And I only had only positive impressions of Africa, of South Africa and Namibia. By the way, I would even say that Namibia is very similar to Kazakhstan in terms of mentality. They, in their past, they were also, so to speak, nomads, herders, you could say. It was really hard for me to compete with them and who could eat more meat. They eat a lot of meat. They also make Bowersax just like we do, which for me was, you could say, a cultural shock. When I tried borsaks in Namibia, the same ones we eat here almost every day, I realized just how, well, there's really no connection between us, right? But the way of life itself, yeah, history just turned out so that we're both meat lovers and we both eat borsaks. And that was pretty surprising for me. I mean, if I hadn't gone there, I probably never would have found out about it.
As far as I remember, besides having access to the ocean, Namibia also has one of the most terrifying deserts in the world, the Namib Desert itself. It's interesting that your attention, or rather your company's focus, landed on this particular country where two elements meet, the desert and the ocean. What are your thoughts about this choice? I mean, people probably say to you, so, Namibia. And you're like, well, not bad overall. But what's there? A desert and an ocean? So, does that somehow make itself felt?
Yeah, it's very, first of all, it's really beautiful to see something like that. And secondly, as ocean farmers, of course, we're more concerned with the ocean itself, meaning the composition of the ocean. And since Namibia itself is a relatively small nation, the ocean is it's incredibly rich in vital nutrients. It's, as one might say, very fertile water, especially for the cultivation of seaweed. And yes, the city I was in Namibia is Lüderitz. It's a very, very beautiful city. I was really impressed by the people themselves, how friendly they are, how everything there is, how safe everything is. And I only had the most pleasant impressions. Yes, that is correct. And I was actually able to see our vast, beautiful farms with my very own eyes during the trip. So I present this product, kind of talk with the farmers, and having the chance to visit our own farm like that, to see where we grow it, where we harvest it, gave me confidence in my product. So, what was really important for me on this trip was to meet the people who actually grow this, to meet the people who harvest and process it. After getting to know them, I realized that our so called behind the scenes experts, maybe they're not always on the front lines or in the spotlight, but I understand that these people really, the product they supply me with is truly a high quality product. And my confidence only grew
Mm-hmm.
in our product. And honestly, talking to hardworking farmers right now, the farmers can definitely feel the change happening. That is, the farmers, distributors, people in agribusiness, they can sense that I really have a serious product.
Uh-huh. With your extensive years of professional experience working with Kazakhstani farmers at various different companies, you've likely developed a deep and insightful understanding of how they make their decisions about purchasing a brand new agricultural product, how they carefully choose it, and what exactly goes on in their minds when they finally say, I definitely need this for my work.
Well, those are the nicest words you can hear. I need this, I want this. But usually it's like this. They usually say that after they've seen real results in their own fields. And actually, the process of choosing products itself, it's quite a meticulous process, which is influenced not only by the farmer himself and his environment, but also by the distributors who provide him with these products. In other words, they have the ability to influence his opinion. But the final word always belongs to the farmer. So either he needs it or he doesn't. In the end, it's always his desire that creates the demand for this product. Even though I've worked in many agricultural companies, and maybe most of those interactions were with distributors rather than directly with farmers, I have always clearly understood that, first and foremost, I am here in Kazakhstan and working very specifically and diligently to help the end consumer, the individual farmer out in the field, because our product is specifically for the farmer, for the land, for the crops that he cultivates. And here, it's very important. Often it happens that the product is just sold,
Hello?
but there's no support for it. So here, there needs to be a comprehensive approach to directly supporting the farmer himself, to show him not just like you applied it at this stage. Here, it's important to understand what kind of program the farmer already has and how our product can be integrated into his program. A lot of different aspects need to be taken into account, basically all of agronomy, so that in the end, the farmer can actually get a really good result. Again, yes, a good result. What does that actually mean, right? So here too, you need to know how to record this properly. Often, it's not just about increasing yield. There are cases, for example, in intensive apple orchards, where they don't need to get more apples. They focus more on the quality of the apples themselves. These are the kinds of things you need to be able to understand what exactly the farmer's specific needs are.
Uh-huh.
There are times, for example, as I mentioned earlier, when farmers use certain fungicides or pesticides that significantly create stress for the crops they're growing. And maybe he doesn't even care at all about the quality or quantity. What matters to him is that basically his plants are able to get through this stress normally and in a shorter period of time. And for him, that's the main thing.
Uh-huh. So, what is the main difference between our, let's say, farmer? Yes, let's suppose we're talking about a specific farmer, the one you just described to us in your answer. What is the main difference? Let's say we take some Western farmer, maybe from Eastern Europe, for example. And what is the main difference aside from mentality and, let's say, the general cultural background? What is the main difference between this farmer and a Kazakhstani farmer? And have you ever had any such case, or maybe you have an example where there are farmers not from Europe and not from, say, Kazakhstan who are very different and are a completely different kind of farmer?
If we take Europe at the state level, they have very strict regulations regarding what you can use in your soil. In other words, they control these aspects very closely. Here in Kazakhstan, we're still moving toward that process. The second major difference is that in Europe, there aren't lands like Kazakhstan. That is to say, in Kazakhstan, farmers have, huge tracts of land. And if, for example, for a European, it's really important to cultivate every centimeter of their land properly according to the plan, then in Kazakhstan, even if a farmer gets yields from just half of their land, they're already basically turning a profit, right? These two approaches are exactly what influence how a farmer ultimately works with their land. I believe that we are moving toward this in Kazakhstan, and the government is heading in this direction as well. And many farmers are now starting to realize that in the near future, for example, if they want to export their agricultural products to Europe, where there are much stricter programs for monitoring exactly what has been used on these specific products, then the farmers themselves will start thinking more deeply about how they grow their crops overall and what specific chemicals or treatments they choose to use. And I think we will get to that point in the future. If we look at the overall differences between farmers, usually I've noticed that the differences come from the scale of the land, meaning the size they're working with. I'm not saying it's because Kazakhstan is big. For example, if we take China, then the average size of a farm is about 3 to 5 hectares. And that's very similar, for example, to India. So there's really high competition there, and the knowledge that farmers have is at a very high level because, first of all, there's competition, and second, as I mentioned earlier, every centimeter of their land has to be cultivated to 100%, even more than 100%. That is, they have to use every single patch of land. If we look at other countries where there are, let's say, larger land holdings, like Kazakhstan, Russia, or Ukraine, then our approach is more similar to each other. It's very different, for example, from the approach of the Chinese or Indians. Well, Europe is, once again, all about the limited amount of land. One of the reasons why, for example, Dutch greenhouses are considered, well, why the Netherlands is one of the leading countries in agriculture is because they have a limit on land. They don't have the kind of land we do, so they have to use every bit of it very efficiently. A greenhouse is located on a specific plot of land, but it produces dozens of times more than that land could produce on its own.
How, in general, does the process of popularizing a particular product work in your field around the world? I mean, for example, how does your company spend time specifically on advertising? So let's say we take an ordinary Kazakhstani farmer somewhere in the north, for example, or in the east, in the Altai region, let's say. Right. And so he grows crops. So, how can he even find out that biostimulants exist? Of course, maybe he reads. If he's not a super old school farmer, then he has access to the internet. But aside from that, how can he really get to know us or the product? So, does someone actually go out to visit him specifically for this? And do you have any kind of, roughly speaking, compliance that allows you, or do you even need to filter out small farmers from large ones? Like, do you work with retail at all, or is that not interesting to you? So, what about this aspect?
Well, in general, we work through distributors.
Through distributors.
And for distributors, of course, it's part of their program. Yes, visiting the farmer, providing them with products, and promoting the farmer from a marketing perspective. We ourselves, as well as Kelp Blue as a company, we have a whole separate department for this. Since it's a young company, we understand the power of marketing. All our experiments that we've conducted, the results from our farmers, all of that, of course, is packaged into more accessible and, let's say, attractive materials, which are then provided to farmers through distributors. None of the information we gather goes unnoticed. In other words, everything is documented and later used in marketing materials. When working with farmers, especially in Kazakhstan, this happens through, let's say, people who are opinion leaders in certain regions. Usually, they're more open to new technologies, new products, and new trials. And then, for example, a field day is organized where other farmers are invited so they can see the results firsthand. At these field days, there are always representatives not only from the distributor company, but also from the company that provided these products to the distributors. And these are exactly the days when, so to speak, the foundation for relationships is built. There is an opportunity for potential cooperation and even forecasting the future, meaning with this farmer. You can answer his questions, share information, and then he himself will tell the distributor, listen, I need this product. It works. I liked it. I want to see it in my field.
Up earlier at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned that there are several leading companies that also produce biostimulants from algae. So there aren't that many of them, right? And your company is one of them. What is this battle for the farmer, like on the vast field of our planet? Or do you actually go into these battles together with distributors, fighting for the farmers and trying to hold your ground? Overall, what is the situation? What is the state, let's say, of the market? How stable is it? How many problems are there with monopoly in this market? Or overall, is it still not a very well developed market with a lot of potential that your company, on the contrary, is aiming to tap into?
If we're talking about the market for biostimulants based on seaweed, there are, of course, over time, let's say proven products that are made from seaweeds like Ascophyllum, Eclonia, and also Sargassum. These are, in other words, types of seaweed that have been used for biostimulants. But the big difference is that these are mostly wild seaweeds that are harvested. So this again, yes, affects the quality of the final product. As for competition here, no. Well, we don't really have that kind of rivalry. So for us, there are colleagues in the field. We're always in favor of gentlemanly, so to speak, competition. Yes. I mean, why fight with someone when you can do joint demonstration trials and see real results in the field? Well, competition actually only helps us get better. And that's always the case in agriculture. There's no kind of, let's say, aggressive competition here. Like trying to undercut someone behind their back. Ooh, block them. Yes, of course, there are certain moments like that, especially when, for example, there's a product that's already well established, and for another product to enter the market, it needs to spend some time to get established to show its results. But if we're talking specifically about the market, for example, Kazakhstan or the CIS as a whole, these are exceptionally significant markets that have a substantial and expansive volume. And actually, there's enough room for all the different players.
Speaking about development, as we wrap up our episode, the market specifically of agricultural activity, both in Kazakhstan and in other regions where you operate, yes, in terms of work. In your professional opinion, how exactly do you envision the global agricultural landscape will realistically evolve and transform over the next 10 or even 20 years? And in your opinion, which of these processes have already started and which ones are still not visible but are already underway?
That's an excellent question. I think the most noticeable difference is that now a lot of technology is being used in agriculture. This includes the use of drones, the use of navigation systems that can control a tractor down to the centimeter, making sure it doesn't miss a single spot in the field, and, for example, minimizing losses from the tractor itself. Basically, just the fact that a tractor drives across the field already means a loss of 2 to 3% because its wheels are pressing down on the crops. I'm explaining this in simple terms so that an ordinary person can understand. For example, those same GPS systems allow the tractor to work the land or harvest crops much more precisely. So, by effectively implementing these advanced technologies, yes, you could say that maybe on a relatively minor and localized scale, it might not seem like a big difference. But if you take everything into account and add it all up, GPS navigation, using drones, and using those same biostimulants together, all of this actually makes a pretty significant difference in how much a farmer can ultimately take home at the end of the season. And overall, the agricultural market is steadily shifting in this direction because people have begun to witness real results from implementing technology and from using new, innovative, modern products. And I think that also the complex landscape of regulatory frameworks will exert a profound influence on the trajectory of all these future developments. That is, specifically government regulation regarding the use of pesticides and various other substances that can have a detrimental or harmful impact on the overall quality of the product, and in general, the long term health and well being of the final consumer who uses these products. I think that once the government really starts to regulate these issues, then the farmer will realize that it's time. It's not just because there are a specific group of dedicated farmers who, in general, are already actively working hard to practice sustainable agriculture. But there are others who, for example, have a more consumer oriented approach. So, for example, I rent this land, and for 10 years, I try to extract as many resources from it as I can, and then I leave, and it's not really my problem anymore, right? And I think if the government really takes charge of this whole process, then there just won't be any room left for that kind of approach.
What essential information should farmers and agribusiness professionals know right now? What insights can you share with us today, well before this information eventually becomes widely known common knowledge?
If we are looking specifically at the agricultural landscape in Kazakhstan, I truly believe that over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see a significant shift where local farmers across the country will start integrating and using biostimulants much more frequently in their daily operations to improve crop yields. It won't be something exotic for farmers anymore. It won't be something like, oh, that's just an additive. So if everything's going well for me, I'll add it. It'll become a standard procedure, a standard product in plant nutrition programs. I think we're already steadily moving forward in that specific direction, and that's exactly what the future truly holds for all of us. And I firmly believe that those farmers, those, let's say, dedicated distributors who begin actively working and collaborating with this product, the sooner they get involved, the sooner they'll successfully secure those highly valuable niche spots in the market. Because I've noticed this in the development both in Europe and in China and in the United States and in Brazil. That is, everywhere. The process of introducing these products went through roughly the same steps. I probably wouldn't be talking about this today if those markets had at some point abandoned biostimulants. For biostimulants, the CIS is, yes, a new market, but it's also one of the largest markets with some of the greatest potential.
And to wrap up today's episode, maybe Galymzhan would like to add a few words to our viewers, to our listeners, as a kind of parting message looking toward the future.
In conclusion, I'd like to say that we're actually not that far removed from farmers. We rely on the results of their work, so to speak. What farmers grow ultimately ends up on our tables. That's why I firmly believe it's important to understand where each and every product comes from, and it's important to actively engage and interact at all levels. And so that farmers understand that, in the end, their clients want a quality product. And so that our clients understand, well, so that we as consumers ourselves understand what we're paying for and what we ultimately get from the farmer. Personally, as a member of the Kelp Blue team, am really passionate about sustainable development in agriculture in Kazakhstan. And I sincerely and truly hope that in the future, Kazakhstan will truly become a major global and international hub for agriculture, and we will be among the top tier leading representatives of agriculture, welcoming guests from Europe and America to share our extensive agricultural knowledge and experience with them. I would really like to see Kazakhstan in this light.
Biostimulants are not the future, they're already being used in the fields of Kazakhstan. It's just that most people haven't even heard about it yet. Galymzhan started out as a plant biotechnologist, and today he is already promoting biostimulants made from oceanic seaweed. His journey in the industry says more about the agricultural market than any analytical report. Galymzhan, thank you so much for this in-depth conversation.
Thanks for having me.
This was the xChief Central Asia podcast. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, and all podcast platforms. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes.